Okay, next up in shapes, we have circles, right? Circles are a bit more awkward because they're not straight edges, okay? And if they're not straight edges, then it's very, very difficult to actually measure them. And given that, we actually have a couple of formulas, right? I showed you these formulas before. You can prove them quite easily, but just for speed, I'm just gonna write them down. So what we mainly look for, what we're gonna look at today at least, and I'm gonna look at area tomorrow, okay, is the circumference, right? Circumference is basically just the distance around a circle. In other words, it's basically just the length of the circle. And that's equal to pi, okay, times by the diameter. Okay, the diameter being the distance right across the circle from one side through the center to the other. Okay, so you might be given that in the question, but you've got to be careful because the other thing that you might be given is the radius. So you need another formula to be able to connect the diameter and the radius. And it's nice and simple. The diameter is just basically 2 times by your radius. And if you remember that one, that second one at least, okay, it's very, very easy to get through these questions in terms of circumference, okay? So let's see if I can draw a circle. Yeah, right. So what you basically have, or what we mean in terms of a circle, or in terms of the circumference, sorry, is basically the length of that blue line there. Okay, so all the way around that circle, okay, all the way from the start to the finish, that's what we mean by the circumference. So if you ever ask for that, that's the length that you need. And to be able to do that, you either need your diameter or you need your radius. Okay, so both of those things nice and clearly on this diagram. This would be the diameter, as I say, from one side of the circle through the center to the other side. That's what we call the diameter. It won't tell you necessarily that it's the diameter. That will just be drawn in your question. So the other one you might be given is the radius, and the radius just goes from the center to the outside of the circle. And if you're given that one, bearing in mind that the formula for circumference is not does not use the radius, you have to do a little bit of jiggery-pokery to be able to find the circumference. And all it basically comes down to is using this second formula. The diameter is just 2 times by the radius. If I was to add another radius onto the other side of the radius that's in that circle, then you can see it would make up a diameter. And that's what we need to be able to find the circumference. So the shortened version of the formula is C equals pi d. Okay, circumference equals pi multiplied by diameter. Okay, remember when we're dealing with algebra, we can squish things together. We don't need the multiplication sign. It just gets a little bit confusing. The other one, obviously, diameter equals 2 times by radius. You don't often write that formula down. It's just kind of a given. But you've just got to, as I say, just look out for the fact that you might be given a radius as opposed to a diameter, and you need to change it accordingly. Okay, right. So in terms of some questions, let's do some down here. So examples. So one circle. And it doesn't matter what size the circle is, how big or small it looks. You've just got to look at the dimensions that are given within it. Okay, so a slightly smaller one, but I'll change the dimensions in a second. Right, let's see if this works. Semicircle. No, it did not work. No, it doesn't work. Let's just draw it freehand. Right. So 3 examples. Each one of them are going to use the formula, but we're going to have to change something slightly for it. Okay. So obviously there's nothing I can actually do with these questions as is. I need a dimension. Okay. So in this first one, I'm going to put a diameter in. Okay. In the second one, I'm going to put this length in. And for this last one, I'm going to put this length in. So let's say this is 8 meters. Let's say this is 10 centimeters. And let's say this is 5 millimeters. And that's what you need. That's all you need to be able to find the circumference. And that's what we're doing for each one of these. We're finding the circumference, or what might be called the perimeter, because at the end of the day, that's what it is. But the reason we don't call it the perimeter when we're dealing with circles is because at the end of the day, it's just one length. It's just one line. Perimeter often refers to kind of a change in direction. Okay, but for circumference, we're basically just following the same line all the way around the circle. However, for this last question, we're going to have to be slightly careful. But when we're dealing with perimeter, it's the distance around the whole shape. Okay, right. So for this first one, the point is we need our formula. Okay, so very, very similar to when we're dealing with other shapes. We need a formula for this, and C equals pi d is that formula. So all we're going to do is we're going to take pi, and as I say, the calculator kind of takes care of that because pi is in your calculator, and you're going to multiply it by the diameter here. The diameter here is 8. Okay, it's given to us nice and clearly in this question. Okay, so we don't need to worry about changing anything in terms of radius. It's fine as it is. All we need to actually worry about is putting this into our calculator. So make sure you know where your pi button is on your calculator and times it by 8. And you should get an answer of 25.1327 blah, blah, blah. Okay, we're just going to round that to one decimal place, so 25.1 here. And because we're dealing in a distance, we need our units. And because it is just a length, it's just meters. When we get to area, it will be meters squared, but just now we're just dealing in terms of a length, so it's just meters. Okay. So for the second one, it's still the same formula. We're still going to do c equals pi d, but the problem here is the fact that we don't actually have our diameter. It's not drawn on there at least. But the idea is if I was to extend this line over here, this is another 10 centimeters. Okay. And 2 of those 10 centimeters, in other words, 2 radii, make up 1 diameter. So I've just got to be very, very careful when I put it into my formula. It's still pi, but rather than multiplying it by the 10 that's just there, I have to think of it in terms of 20 because it's the diameter that I need. The 10 centimeters shows the radius, so I need 2 of them. I need 20 to be able to work my formula. So then I take my calculator and I can do the same thing again. I do pi times by 20, and that will give me 62.831 blah, blah, blah. Again, round this to one decimal place. We have 62.8. This is centimeters this time, but it's still just a length. Okay, so I don't need any squared or anything. Okay, so that's it there. Right, this last one is ever so slightly different. But the point is here, I've got this curved length. Okay, and as long as I've got a curved length, I have to do it in terms of circles. But the idea is it's not a full circle. So I'm going to still start off with c equals pi d. Okay, I'm still going to take my pi and I'm still going to multiply it by the diameter. Right, if I had a full circle here, and if I just drew this as a dotted line, okay, then the diameter would be that 5 millimeters. So that's fine. Okay, but what I've got to remember at the end of all this is that I have to divide it by 2. Okay, so the formula doesn't know whether you've got a half circle, a semicircle, a quarter circle, whatever it is. It's just assuming that you're dealing with a full circle that has a diameter of 5 millimeters. So you have to change it at the end to make sure that you're dealing with the shape that you have. So still put in your calculator, pi times by 5. Okay, that's going to give me 15.707. And then I'm going to divide that by 2 to deal with the actual circumference that I have. I've only got half of a circle, so I've only got 7.853 ... However, if I'm dealing with this whole shape, if I want to find the perimeter of this full shape, then I've only found this curved edge here. I also need this flat edge along the bottom. And I know that that's just 5 millimeters, so I have to add on 5 millimeters. Okay, so I take the 7.853 blah, 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 blah. I add on a 5. I can do all this in my calculator, and it's just going to give me 12.8539 ... Again, one decimal place, 12.9 for this one, millimeters for this one. Okay. Right. There's going to be different kind of problem-solving questions involved in what we do with circles. It's not all just going to be diameters and radii and just working out exactly what we need to do. Okay, there's going to be semicircles, there's going to be quarter circles, there's going to be circles on top of circles. There's going to be lots of different variations on this. Okay, so you just have to be aware of the question and just use your problem-solving brains to work it through. You might have a couple of extra lines as in this last one. Okay, but just try what you can and let me know if there's any problems.